Welcome to Granite's Edge, a Republican-led legislative action program bringing information to our residents of Pelham and New Hampshire. News about legislation that's happening right now in our state capital of Concord that will affect you. Why are we called Granite's Edge? Our small town of Pelham, New Hampshire is located on the southern border of our wonderful Granite state, so we're right on the edge. And as all of you know, that edge is exactly what we have over others. Granite's Edge. In this program, we'll take a dive into some of the most important legislation of this session. We'll talk to legislators about the challenges in our state and about the committees they serve on. And every month, we'll have a special guest, someone who's an expert in their field who will bring you the truth about important topics that are linked to important legislation that may affect your liberty and freedom. Your host today is Herschel Nunez, an elected state representative right here from Pelham, New Hampshire, who thinks it's important that you know what the legislators know. So stay tuned. We have a great show for you today.
Hello and welcome to Granite's Edge. Today on our program we have Representative Bob Greene from Hudson. He is a representative here in District 37 who was elected in for this biennium in our last election cycle. Also on the program today we'll have John and Laura Spottiswood with the Pelham GOP. Let's move on with it and we'll be talking to Bob. Hey Bob, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing?
Thanks for being on the program today.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Bob, you know, we met last year during our candidacy when we were running for office. We did a lot together during all of that. We became friends. We now serve in the legislature together. Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, where you're from, maybe why you ran for office,
Sure.
just so they can get to know you a little bit.
Sure. Well, I'm a Hudson resident, 14 years now. Been married for 30 years. My wife, Kathy. We came here near the end of my Air Force career. I did 20 years in the Air Force, various assignments in Illinois and Germany. I finished my final 4 years in the Air Force at Hanscom Air Force Base. After 20 years, I retired from the Air Force in 2007, and I've been working a lot in the graphic and design jobs in the Boston and here in New Hampshire as well, various areas. The last 5 years, I've been employed at BAE Systems, but about 4 years ago, I started getting more involved in politics. I went to a couple of New Hampshire GOP events. I liked them a lot, and I met some people I've become very good friends with. We started attending the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington, D.C., otherwise known as CPAC. So I've been going to those now for the past 4 years in a row, and I just got more and more involved with politics. That's a lot of national level stuff, but also with the state level activity. And I saw some things that were going on, even in the last biennium, where we had a Republican majority. We lost critical votes. I couldn't believe we lost some of these votes, like veto overrides and things like that, because of poor attendance. So at that point, I thought, I don't want to just be a spectator anymore. I want to be in the game. I want to serve and contribute, because I know I'm a principled conservative, and I know I can show up. And before I decided to actually run for office, I talked over with my supervisor at work, and I could flex my time. And I think that in itself gives me a unique perspective as a state rep, because what I did notice last year when I was running for office, a great number of state reps, they're either self-employed or they're retired, or maybe in some cases they're college students who have the time with their workload to serve. And there's not a real lot of us who are serving in the legislature and with full-time jobs. So I thought that's something I have to offer, and that's a perspective that's not all that common within the legislature. So because of my principles and wanting to get involved and what was going on even in the last biennium, I thought I want to get off the sidelines and I want to serve.
Well, we're really happy to have you in the House. I was happy that I won. I was happy that you won. I've said this many times on this program. Our entire slate of Republicans of 11 candidates, of which 6 were incumbents, 5 open spots, we all won. We flew right through. And, you know, with an election year coming up next year, I know we're all hoping that, that we'll be able to make it through again. I believe that we have a full 11 slate rerunning again.
That's my understanding too.
Yeah, so that's gonna be really good for all of us being incumbents. Now, what committee do you serve on?
I'm on legislative administration.
And tell me what the duties of, we call it a Legi admin, right?
Legi admin for short,
Yeah.
yes.
Tell us what the duties of Legi admin are.
It's kind of a catch-all. I mean, it's pretty much what the name describes. It's administrative affairs dealing specifically with the legislature, it's like internal sort of statutes, that sort of things that apply specifically to the legislature. And it's not as busy of a committee as, say, like being on finance or ways and means or commerce, but it does
Or labor.
Or labor, absolutely, right. But it definitely, it has a role, and it's a standing committee.
And I saw that you guys had about 25 bills that came through this past year. And just like in the committee that I'm on in labor, a lot of these bills don't even make it through. They come in and they're deemed inexpedient to legislate, which means they're basically killed. And a lot of that happened in your committee as well this year. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about your committee and some of the bills that went through. Earlier in the week, Bob and I talked about some of the things, highlights of bills that we could talk about, and that's what we're going to be bringing you today. So let's go ahead and get into some of that. You want to?
Great.
Okay, so let's talk about HB 385. This is a bill that was brought forth to establish a maternity care room for members of the general court. Now, this passed as OTPA, which is auto-passed. There was an amendment that was put on it.
Correct.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about this bill? The governor signed this into law.
Right.
So go ahead and give us some info on this bill.
Right, yeah, it was, like it says, establishing a maternity care room for members of the general court. The amendment was just also making it available to the general public. That's simply that's all the amendment was. And heard some interesting testimony from it. Terry Paff, the House Chief Operating Officer, came in, and basically what he said is that there's so many things that are already being done before the statute was signed by the governor. There's a big bathroom renovation plan in the works over the next year or so for the State House and the Legislative Office building next door. They're all going to be modernized and be more ADA compliant, and many of the restrooms will have maternity, capability or the privacy areas in those rooms.
It's something we need really bad. Our restroom facilities really need to be updated.
Yes, they're a little long in the tooth. Yes, that's right. But there's also, they also have purchased lactation pods, and you may have seen these in certain airports. Like they're kind of like egg-shaped little pods, actually, where a woman can be, go in there and
have privacy.
Have the privacy, absolutely. So that's already been purchased, and they're buying one for the State House, and there might be some other ones on the way. I mean, so Terry Paff basically said, to our committee, you do whatever you want, but what you're asking for is basically it's in the works. It's already happening.
So it was signed, even though it was already happening, it was signed into law because.
Well, what happened in committee is, some of us, per Terry's advice, were leaning in the direction of voting against it because just they have the flexibility with it instead of codifying it, instead of putting it in a law. That there's certain advantages of not doing that, to be more flexible, with future requirements of things like that. And then when you put it into law, every jot and jittle has to be there, and if it's not there, then sometimes the law doesn't do what it's intended. But in this situation, that's what he recommended. We had an exec session on this recently, and we had a substitute on the committee that day, and she spoke up, and she made a pretty good point. She said, "This all sounds great, but I would rather have this in law so that it can't be taken away." And that convinced the Republicans on the committee
to go ahead and join.
Yeah, so we voted for it.
And this passed, and it has been signed by the governor. So this is going into law this year, this coming year, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Let's move on through our list here. HB 456. This is relative to persons required to register as a lobbyist. This is for people who already work for organizations that are considered lobbyist organizations that already have filed their fees to be lobbyist organizations. This bill wanted anybody who came in through that lobbyist organization to have to also file independently of their lobbyist organization. Is that correct?
That's the gist of it, yes. And so,
and that would have been at the rate of $50 per person. It was already $50 per lobbyist group, and now they wanted to add another $50 per person that worked for that lobbyist group. Correct?
I believe so, yes.
So this was ITL'd.
Yep.
And tell me some of the background on this.
Well, yeah, we ITL'd it. It was unanimous. And the backstory is there's a person from a prominent political organization in the state, from my understanding, who's testifying in front of several committees. And people knew who he was, and he was a prominent person in this organization. They thought, well, he should be registered as a lobbyist. But, you know, during my short time in the legislature and the hearings that I attended, I saw him frequently testifying, and he was in compliance, which means he was wearing his orange lobbyist badge.
There are rules about people who are lobbyists, organizations that send folks in, they're lobbyist organizations. They have a certain type of identification badge they have to wear, just like we have badges. They have badges, so that we always know who the lobbyist is in the hallway, in the committee rooms, in the gallery, you know, above the representative chamber, just so that we can identify who they are. There are no hidden folks, right?
Right, right.
But that bill didn't make it through, and that was a unanimous decision, right?
Right. Well, yeah, we just saw that there's a lot of gray areas here. So we just, you know, you could have someone who's maybe a dues-paying member of the New Hampshire Auto Dealers, and so he goes to testify on one bill one time. And I don't think that should be construed as being a lobbyist. He's going as a private citizen.
Right.
And so that's the thing. We didn't want people who just very sporadically, or maybe the only time in their lives, going to Concord to testify to, you know, be deemed a lobbyist just because they have to be paying dues to an organization.
And a lobbyist is also someone who is paid. They receive compensation
That's their livelihood.
for providing that service at the legislature on behalf of the companies they represent. So if you're not receiving any money, are you still a lobbyist?
I'm not sure you are. Yeah.
I don't think you are.
Yeah,
if you're not receiving money, you shouldn't be considered a lobbyist.
You mean, to me, that's an activist.
Yeah, right, right. Well, maybe they're trying to get rid of activists too.
Could be.
Okay, let's move on down our list here. This is going to be a good one to talk about for a few minutes, and this was a bill that was ITL'd as well, and I'm happy that it was ITL'd. I don't know about, you're probably happy that it was as well. As HB 519, and 519 was relative to the selection of delegates to an Article 5 convention. Now, Article 5 conventions are put together when 2/3 or 34 state legislatures, 2/3 of the state legislatures, 34 state legislatures, vote that there needs to be a convention that deals with things like amendments in the Constitution. Is that correct?
That's right.
Now, while we all probably agree that there could be some need for some discussion in things like this, what about Article 5 doesn't work?
Well, some of the drivers of this are people who want to see term limits. They want to see a balanced budget, and they think that the only way this can be achieved is through an Article 5 convention instead of the normal amendment process. I mean, in our country's history, we only have 27 amendments to the Constitution. They think this is the way to get some of these issues finally, you know, codified into law, put into law. But the problem with it I see is that the whole Constitution is susceptible then to rewrite. Everything, First Amendment, Second Amendment.
Once the convention is opened up, once it's ratified and opened up, the entire Constitution is up for amendment.
Absolutely, you know, and there's a lot of prominent people on both sides of the issue, even amongst Republicans and conservatives. There's a big divide. You know, some really want it, some don't. But I think the best argument I heard against it is from Dr. Larry Arnn. He's the president of Hillsdale College, And he says, well, quite honestly, right now, we're not really adhering to the Constitution all that well in this country as it is with the current amendment process.
Right.
So even if we have an Article 5,
is it going to do any good?
yeah, is that going to make us any more constitutional? Is that going to improve our adherence to the Constitution? No. But at the same time, like I just said, it's also going to make it a lot more vulnerable.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about our rights to free speech and our rights to be able to protect ourselves and our families, our loved ones, our neighbors if they need it. Let's talk about those things that could be changed. If Article 5 were to open up, if that convention happens, could an amendment go in, or could a change go in to the Second Amendment that says people are no longer allowed to carry guns?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible.
Could they go in and say, guess what? You're only allowed to speak at certain times. The rights to free speech could be taken away as well.
Yeah, you know, it's pretty mind-blowing because we as a nation, we take these rights for granted, you know, so to hear what could happen, it's very disturbing.
You know, we've seen people say that they want this. Even people like Ben Shapiro or
Mark Levin.
Mark Levin. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, called for an Article 5 Constitution.
A lot of proponents will often cite that the late Anton Scalia was also a proponent of it.
He was also a proponent of the convention. But what we see here is people asking for things at a time when our country is very divided over lots of different issues.
That's for sure.
And in my mind, an Article 5 convention should not be used to settle those big divide differences. That should come between the people, and then they should use that for other things like providing a balanced budget, which they don't talk about too much.
No.
You know, but when we have candidates running for president who want to have a health care bill that would put us $52 trillion in debt, how would we ever get a balanced budget, even if they did an Article 5 convention?
Absolutely, yeah. The talk I'm hearing nowadays is totally in the opposite direction. It's not a big topic these days.
Well, I think that it's up to the people to rein in the government. We have to stand up. We have to be vocal. We have to be active. And that's one of the reasons why you and I both ran for the legislature.
Absolutely.
Let's move on down our list here. Let's talk about HB 650. Now, this is another one that was deemed inexpedient to legislate. It established a committee to study the economic challenges of employed people serving in the legislature. Now, you talked about this when you were talking just a little while ago when I was introducing you to the folks. You said something really important about the fact that you have a full-time job and you serve in the legislature and you serve on committee.
That's correct. And
you were able to work out a flex time with your employer in order to be able to serve, and your employer was proud for you to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, great
support. You work for a company that you have great support in your company, and it's awesome to hear. Now then, we know that in this past cycle of election for 2018 into 2019 for this biennium, there were many younger legislators that were elected in. And one of the first things that we heard in the legislature was, how are we supposed to do this job? We don't get paid. Well, that's right, we don't get paid. Yeah. We get paid $100 a year. So I don't know about them, but I think that you and I both looked into that rule before we ran for office.
I just had a flashback to orientation when I think it was the sponsor of this bill, the one that stood up and kind of complained about that. And it was a Democrat, a freshman Democrat in orientation who spoke about this. Well, one of the senior Democrats running orientation kind of rebuked him right then and there and said, well, you should have basically figured this out before you decided to run.
Right, you're right. And I heard that from several different people. We all have challenges in our life when it comes to serving in Concord. There are a lot of retired people that serve in the legislature. There are a lot of people who are not employed. I'm not saying unemployed, they're not employed. they in their households, they choose not to be employed, that are in the legislature. There are some people that, that got the flex time, but then we had a lot of legislators this time, some who told me, well, you know, I got skipped over by a raise because I was gone so much of the time. But that's part of the job.
Yeah, that's part of the risk. I mean, if I was like really had a real definite career path at my job, like if I was really shooting to be a middle management or something, then maybe I wouldn't have chosen to do this, because there's certain things you need to do and make time in your life for if that's your goal. But
well, we're happy that that one got ITL'd. I don't think that the state of New Hampshire is ready for an expenditure of salaries to legislators.
Absolutely.
Boy, would our taxes go up.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't know. For example, just to compare us to Massachusetts, we get $100 a year. A Massachusetts state rep, they just voted themselves a raise this past year. They're getting over $65,000 a year. Plus, they get pretty hefty mileage reimbursement. If they live within X number of miles of Boston, they get $15,000 a year additional. If they live
a stipend.
Yes,
Yep.
And if they live beyond that mileage amount, it's 20.
That's an amazing figure for them to get paid. We have a citizenry-led legislature here, where our Constitution in our state was ratified, stating that we would get $100 a year. We also get mileage, and we get an easy pass, you know, to use for state business.
We get to drive the New Hampshire tolls for free.
Going back and forth to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
For Concord business.
Absolutely.
But this bill would have created a study committee that would have, the Speaker would have been able to appoint 5 representatives. The President of the Senate would have been able to appoint a senator. And then there was a long list of organizations that the committee would have been required to speak to. And I did some research on some of those committees. Now, I'm not going to call them out by name, but what I found was that they were all democratically led organizations. So we have the Speaker, who is a Democrat, appointing representatives. I know this is going to be stacked way against everybody. I'm just glad that it was ITL'd. Do you know what the vote on that, do you remember what the vote on that was?
Oh boy, yeah, it was 7-4, just down party lines, basically.
Down party line.
Right, right. And I spoke to this bill on the floor too. I mean, I basically said, and that was early March when I testified on this in the House chamber. At that point, we already had 56 study committees, right, you know, that had been approved. 56, and so the number is much higher than that, I'm sure by now. But so that means reps have to come to Concord. They have to get paid mileage for however number of times they're going to meet, and who knows how long these committees are going to exist.
So there are some of these committees, appointed committees is what we call them, that have been going on for several years.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yep.
So, okay. Knowing that that was ITL'd, I think that we're happy that that happened. I would look for something similar to come back again.
Oh, I'm sure.
In the near future. I'm sure that, you know, while we encourage anybody to run for state representative, there are rules that are out there, and you just need to research it out and find out what those rules are before you put your name in the hat.
That's right. That's right.
Let's talk about, there's a Senate bill that came through, SB 235, that was signed into law by the governor. This is relative to sexual harassment complaints in general court, and authorizing a human resources professional to be hired to manage us, right?
Right, right.
Now, I don't think I've seen any type of sexual harassment happen in the legislature since I've been there.
Right, right. In our short time, we haven't. I know, that obviously, in recent years there have been, you know, cases brought forth, but
there have been complaints. Do we know if any of those complaints went anywhere? Without stating names?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's hard to know the details of them because it's just by the very nature of the complaints, you know, we don't get to hear a lot about them. But I don't know if it's such a volume or such a problem that they need to bring in someone from the outside. I mean, and that there again, Terry Path came in to testify on this, and he thought they already had a process in place that was pretty good, you know, with a right level of discretion and decorum, and you know, and they seemed to be working pretty well. An issue he brought up was, can an outside person not really attuned to the needs of the legislature, can they really do this job in a way that's going to serve the legislature's needs? So that was his concern.
I know in the beginning of the biennium, when we started our session back in January, most of us went to some classes that dealt with dealing with people one-on-one and the correct decorum that you should hold when you're in the legislature, which I don't think any of us would have any problem with any of that. You know, but we did attend some meetings, and the results of attending those meetings were turned into the speaker. So we've all gone through classes for sexual harassment, for other types of you know, being able to get along with your fellow employer, your fellow legislator. And while a lot of us don't see things eye to eye, I think that on this, I think all of us show respect to everybody in the legislature. But it's now a law. The governor signed it into law, so so we'll continue to do a good job.
That's right. That's right.
We're going to go back to one more House bill, 457. Now, 457 is a bill to require meetings and sessions of committees of the House to be videotaped or recorded. The chamber is already videoed. All of our actions inside the chamber, in the House chamber, all of that is already recorded. Every session is provided online on the NewHampshire.gov website. Anybody can view it. They can download it. They can, you know, do whatever they want to do with it. And this is more about recording the words that are said in committee meetings.
Correct. You know, there's a lot to really unpack with this, because we have 20 standing committees, and plus whatever subcommittees from those. And if the original intent was thinking towards maybe we should be videotaping all of those. It's pretty much a real daunting thing on many levels. I mean, the cost to do that, the amount of infrastructure that have to be created to do that, and the administrative workload. So that was all a lot to really unpack and try to figure out what to do. And right now I'm on a subcommittee that's dealing with this specifically. And I'm just one of 5 on a subcommittee. And we've heard a lot of good testimony from IT folks there in Concord and everything. And the direction it looks like we're going to go is we're going to just focus on audio only, because the concern I brought up and others were concerned with video, the technology it's changing so rapidly.
So rapidly. Yeah.
By the time we figure out what platform to use and install the infrastructure, it's most likely it's going to be obsolete, even at the point when it's installed. Whereas audio isn't quite like that. You know, it's a little bit more mobile and everything. So what we're looking at is a pilot project where we just record one committee with audio, and we're going to probably use the Ways and Means Committee, because they're already doing that to a certain extent. They're recording, you know, their sessions. So
the recording of the session of Ways and Means is for their own personal purposes, because they talk about so much.
They've been doing it though. Yeah, it's not a part of any official record, just for their own benefit.
Just for themselves. Yeah. Right.
So I mean, so the plan would be to record them for several things. We got to figure out a good audio platform at a reasonable cost. We have to figure out a protocol, and we have to figure out the administrative, how much administrative workload is there going to be, and then figure out, you know, what are the storage and bandwidth requirements for this.
Right.
You know, so the pilot project would give us an opportunity to do that, and once we get the kinks ironed out, then we can scale it through all the other committees. But I think that's a more sensible way to go. It's going to make the cost a lot more reasonable. So
that original financial note that was attached to this, I believe that I heard rumors about if it was going to be a video infrastructure that was set up in the LOB for all the committee rooms, there was like $1.5 million
it could be
for the cabling and the equipment and the ongoing, and then there would be maintenance costs to all of that, and also there would have to be some type of admin cost on that because people are going to have to man that stuff.
We'd have to hire more people. We just,
Yeah.
they have to, just have more people doing this full time, just because there's the archiving aspect of it too. And even like we had some of the administrative staff come to our subcommittee and talk about this, even with what they're doing Ways and Means, and it could be a fair amount of work. Just what they're doing right now, what they have been doing through that committee is it can be a lot of work.
So you guys are looking at audio, and we're going to hear more about this after the first of the year, I'm sure.
Right.
Okay, very good. Now, those are the items that we decided to talk about Legi Admin. There's a couple of other stories that are in the news this week that you and I spoke about previously, and I just want to touch on a couple of those things because I don't know if the people out there understand some of the actions that are being taken by the Speaker in the House of Representatives, Speaker Shurtleff. Over the last session, during the last session, one of our fellow legislators shot a squirrel in his backyard. And he posted that online, that he shot a squirrel in his backyard. And the Speaker removed him from his committee. He was on Fish and Game, Wildlife, and he removed him from the committee because he said that wasn't proper protocol for a legislator to do something like that online, to post a picture of a squirrel that he shot in his backyard. As a pesky squirrel at that.
Right, yeah.
I talked to the legislator. It was a pesky squirrel.
Yeah, what was it, going after some of his chickens or something like that?
It was getting into everything.
Yeah, right.
And so, our state is full of people who are hunters and people who own firearms, people who have large swaths of land and they hunt and they fish and everything. And he held him to a higher standard because he was on that committee, and he was removed from the committee. Well, this happened again 2 more times this week. Now, another fellow legislator made a bad comment about someone who is director of an agency, and the Speaker also removed him from his committee assignment as well. Now, before I get into the third person that we're going to talk about, I do want to say that the first 2 people that we're talking about here are Republican legislators, right? And we all, from time to time, say something that we don't mean to say, or we say something that we shouldn't have said. And hopefully we're smart enough to go back and correct ourselves, especially if it's done publicly, like on social media or something like that. We should always go back and say, I may have bad choice of words there. Let me correct that. But I guess this didn't happen on these 2, and the Speaker removed them permanently from their committees. Now, the first legislator was on Fish and Game, and the second legislator was on criminal justice. And that one is a little more troubling to me because he was a very vocal Republican on criminal justice.
Very strong proponent of Second Amendment, yes.
Now we're going to go into the third scenario here. There was another legislator that was complained about to the Speaker's office this week. This was a Democrat out of
Hampton?
The Seacoast area. And I'm not saying any names on any of these things, but this legislator said profanity online against school choice, basically, against private schools and religious schools.
Yeah, expletive toward private and religious
there was
schools.
an expletive word that was used, and some of the language that was used in the post also was misleading because it talked about the use of IEPs in private schools and charter schools and how their child was not able to go where they wanted to go because they were disabled or needed to be in the IEP program. The complaints were made about that legislator who is a Democrat, but the Speaker only temporarily removed that person from the Education Committee, I'll have you, This person made these biased attacks against private and religious schools, and they serve on the education committee.
Right.
Which is that's a biased vote on the committee.
Oh, absolutely.
And they were only removed temporarily, and they were only removed for the off time.
For the next 3 months, right. This is like the quietest time in the legislative year. So there's like virtually no impact to anything coming out of committees right now for education or anything. It just
Do you see an unfairness
oh, absolutely.
in any of that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a double standard going on here, and I think, yeah, I think he wanted to soft pedal it, you know, with his fellow Democrat. The speaker wanted to do that. On the other hand, like now the person who is on criminal justice, you know, very outspoken on Second Amendment issues. A lot of the really awful gun bills that were in the House this year, they got vetoed by the governor. They're coming back next year. The LSRs are already being written. Those are what we get mentioned. Come the bills, they're going to be back. It's going to be, you know, Groundhog Day for those bills.
We have I think we have seven.
Seven, I believe, yeah.
Seven firearm legislation bills coming in.
And so it really looks like, you know, it was just a power play made to take a very influential person and, you know, and set him aside to improve, you know, to see if there's any better chance that these crazy gun laws can get passed next year.
Do you have any idea of who replacements are going to be?
I haven't heard,
I haven't
I've heard no discussion.
No discussion
for both
whatsoever.
the Republicans, yeah. I haven't heard of any discussion.
The Democrat gets to go back, but the Republicans don't.
Right.
So, well, there you go. There you have it on that. Well, you know what, Bob? We've had a good time here talking today. I want to thank you for coming on the program.
My pleasure.
We learned a lot about legislative administration, what its functions are. Folks, Bob has already announced that he's going to run again in 2020. I'm sort of letting the cat out of the bag right now.
That's okay.
So look for him on your ballot and vote for this guy. He's a smart, smart person, and we need him in the legislature. Bob, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Herschel.
We'll be back in just a couple of minutes with the Pelham GOP. Welcome back. We're here with John and Laura Spottiswood from the Pelham GOP, our stars here in town. Folks, how's everything going?
Excellent. How are you, Herschel?
I'm doing good. What's been going on with the GOP this past month?
Well, we've been pretty busy for the last couple months. We've had all of our Senate candidates come through.
Tell everybody who they are.
Yes. First, Mr. Bill O'Brien, Mr. Corky Mesner, and Mr. Don Bolduc have recently come through on the last two meetings. Excellent turnouts. Our October meeting was our 2020 kickoff event. We had Mr. Bill O'Brien and Corky Mesner there, along with Steve Negron with
that was a fun
Congressional District 2.
Yeah.
So we had a big event for that. Great turnout, lots of people, lots of food. Our recent meeting, November meeting, was Mr. Don Bolduc, and again, a very, very strong turnout. Lots of veterans showed up. Obviously, he's a general, so he does draw that crowd. Great event. It's been fantastic.
Sounds like fun. I wasn't able to make that meeting. Did he say anything special about platforms he's running on, or anything like that we can remember?
There was some questions about, one interesting question that came up was asked to the general about border security on the northern border, which never gets talked about. And it was interesting, and this person said they have a friend that works in that business, and there's a lot of drugs that come through.
From the northern border?
Yeah. And
something we don't hear about very often.
Exactly, and it kind of caught my attention. And the general talked about it, and he said that it needs to be addressed as well. It's something that seemed to be in his wheelhouse that maybe he had discussions about, which was interesting. But he was more like, surveillance and stuff like that. Like it definitely needs a better look to be had on it. So it was an interesting topic.
When he visited at Old Home Day and came by the GOP tent that was out there, I was able to have a long conversation with him. He's a very nice person.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that his heart's in the right place. But we have many candidates this year for the Senate position. They're going against Jeanne Shaheen,
Yes.
Who's been in office for quite a long time in many different respects. She's held many different offices here in the state of New Hampshire. So that's a formidable opponent, is what I'm going to say there. Do we know if there are any other candidates that are going to be filing? Have we heard any rumors of filings for the Senate seat?
Laura, you want to take this and you want me to?
Well, there is a rumor that Corey Lewandowski is going to file. So far, it's just a rumor.
Well, I asked this on purpose because Vice President Pence was here yesterday.
Yes.
And there were so many people in Concord. You couldn't even get into the town. It was just, everything was closed off. There were so many people that were there. It was a great turnout for the Vice President. He was coming in to file for President Trump to be on the ballot for the primary that comes in February. And there was, Corey Lewandowski was there handling the Vice President. He was the handler. And somebody from the crowd, on this video that I saw, they asked, "Hey, Corey, are you going to run?" And he said, "I'll let you know by the end of the year."
Oh,
So
wow.
we have about 6 or 7 more weeks to go before we may get a final answer from him. And then we'll have probably all of our candidates already. But anybody can, they can still, when is the last day for them to sign up? Do we know?
I don't know
to run
that.
for
Do
that
you
seat?
know?
I don't know
the
off the top
filing
of my head.
deadline?
It's
I
a
don't
while,
know.
though.
Yeah.
They can jump in at any time.
Okay. Well, I think that there's a good roster that's out there, so I'm really happy that they're coming by. They're coming by to Pelham to see our folks here who are very, very interested in knowing who's going to be out there and what the representation is going to look like.
One thing I'd like to add to that is we do try to get them in the very beginning, and that way there people can get familiar with them, and usually we have pretty good luck getting them back for a second time. That we have great turnout here in Pelham. They definitely want to earn some votes here. So if you missed them the first go around, they will more than likely be back.
Good. That's good.
Yeah, I'd like to say too, at the meetings, it's a great opportunity to listen to the candidates, but it's also a great opportunity to ask them your questions. Usually they'll take a number of questions. So it really is a good way to get to know a candidate and get a good feel for them before you vote.
And another great thing about the Pelham GOP is come on down, meet the candidates, and meet other like-minded people in our town. Maybe become a member of the Pelham GOP.
That'd be great.
And start coming to the meetings regularly and help us formulate all the actions that we take throughout the year and all the different events that we do. I mean, you guys are the rock stars. We're so proud of both of you. I would like to take a moment to talk about an event that I was able to attend. You guys were there this past month. There was a setup of animals, and there were over at the saddlery, and there's a group that calls themselves Restore Pelham Property Rights that are interested in the repeal of Article 3 that happened at our town elections last year. And just to remind everybody what that is an ordinance was passed that said if you have less than 3 acres of land, you can no longer have livestock on your property, which in a lot of people's minds was very overreaching. We understand sort of why the petition warrant was filed. I think it could have been worked out a little more amicably between the parties. But it was put on the ballot and it was voted in. The ordinance is now created. It's now an ordinance in the town. And the folks that are involved with the Restore Pelham Property Rights would like to see that article repealed. They've done a really good job of organizing. And they were able to get the 4-H Club involved, Boy Scouts involved, several farmers from around, people deal with agriculture and livestock from around town. And they brought their animals over to the saddlery. I was so impressed when I got there. There was a llama, and there were mini donkeys, and a mini horse, and a regular horse, and there were all different kinds of chickens. Chickens I've never seen before in my life. I didn't know they made chickens like that. But tell us a little bit about that event and what happened there.
I thought it was a great event. The whole goal was to raise awareness about the repeal and to really show people why we want to repeal this as a group. That these animals, we call them livestock, but they're really these people's pets.
Right.
And you could really see that at the meet and greet. The animals were so well behaved. We had no issues. We had all those animals,
whatsoever.
and they were just happy as can be, very content. We also were able to raise a little bit of money and, you know, just raise awareness all the way around. So we had raffles. It was a great event.
Will this be a petition warrant on the next election?
That's the goal, yes. Yeah,
And
we've
that
got
election
signatures.
is in March?
In March.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we got to go to the polls several times next year.
That's right. It'll be a busy year,
A lot of voting.
definitely.
So people came in, they got to meet the farmers, they got to meet the pets,
Yep.
the animals. I know, I stood over there and scratched on a donkey for a long time between his ears and on his face. And I went to walk off and he hit me with his head. He wanted me to scratch him some more. You know, the bad thing about an ordinance being passed like this, I think, let's just look at a little issue. I have a child who goes to school that is in 4-H club, that wanted to buy a rabbit to put into a hutch to show that rabbit in school. My child cannot do that now because I
Right.
have less than 3 acres of land.
Yeah.
So I find that ordinance to be a little bit discriminating because it's cutting off the educational livelihood of our children. Now, I know that I spoke with a couple of the parents that were there, and they said that were it not for them having the animals on their property and on their farms, that their kids wouldn't be as well grounded as they are, because the kids have taken on the chores of taking care of the animals, and that it shows them responsibility and caring for animals and things like that. Do you agree with me that this is sort of a discriminatory ordinance that was passed, that to me, it's cutting off educational opportunities for kids?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a family that joined the group, and their daughters raised chickens. And today, one of the daughters built a coop for the chickens, all on her own. And just that experience alone, she takes such great care of these chickens.
I think also, John and Laura, we've gotten some mixed language back from the town on this, on people that would be grandfathered in and what the conditions of those grandfathered pieces are. When the ordinance was put out, there was no grandfathered remarks that were put into it whatsoever. There are people that have called me on the phone and said, well, I heard today that, you know, if you had animals, you can always have animals. But that's not how I understood it. I understood it that through the attrition process, as your animal base decreased, you would not be able to replace those animals. And sooner or later, as all of your harvests happen, or all of your sales happen, or one of your animals passes, or something like that, through all of that process, you will soon be without livestock and you'll be in compliance with the ordinance.
Right.
So I think there's more work that the town would need to do on that. But we have 3 things that are going to be on the ballot. I'm going to keep on talking about these every show. The first 2 deal with this ordinance. Now, there's going to be a repeal that's coming out for this ordinance, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Petition warrant.
Correct.
There's also going to be a town warrant on the ballot for the same ordinance that is tightening up the language of the law. Okay? So, what most people don't know is that if the town has a warrant for an ordinance and a petitioner has a warrant for an ordinance, it doesn't matter if the petitioner's passes or not. If the town's passes, the petitioner's goes away.
Yep.
So we've got a lot of work to do.
Yes, we do.
To make people aware of both of those and how they should vote. And I think there's a really great start that's going on for this group, too, for Restore Pelham Property Rights, because they're now raising money, and they're they're becoming active in our town, and they're doing what it takes in order to get out there and get this taken care of. The third thing is the Agricultural Commission.
Yes.
And the Agricultural Commission is being formed. They want it to be formed. There's a study committee already.
Yeah.
They want it to be formed to deal with these types of issues and other types of issues as well. Anything agricultural livestock. To report to the planning board, to report to the selectmen, their findings, their suggestions to help along with these processes of decision making. I would really like to see for that Ag Commission to be created. I would love to see for the farmers market be brought back. That was a lot of fun.
Yep.
That was great. Yeah.
Yep. So do you guys have any thoughts about the Ag Commission?
I'd like to make a comment on that, because I think no matter, even if they do tighten up the language, people are still losing their property rights. Someone's still going to lose on this, where we didn't before. I think it needs to go right back to the drawing board. We need to go back, start all over, get the Agricultural Commission started, and let's work on it as a community, rather than banning animals, because animals should never be banned. That's mistake
Right.
number one. Someone always loses in that situation. So let's get the Agricultural Commission going, repeal the article completely, start fresh, and work on this as neighbors in a community. Because no matter what, even if you do change the language around, we're a perfect example. We have just under 2 acres of land. We've had all kinds of livestock in the past. We put kids through college, took a break. Now we have the opportunity to do it again. We can't.
Right, we can't.
We don't have anything at
I
the
didn't mean to
moment.
interrupt you, but you can't.
Right. We're a perfect example of it. We don't have anything at the moment, so we can't get any animals, any livestock. And there's nothing to replace because we don't have it at the moment. We could easily go adopt two goats right now that would serve a great purpose for us. We have an acre of land behind us. Mm-hmm. It's a no-cut zone. I can't do anything with it. But the vegetation is out of control. That's where the goats would come in handy. Mm-hmm. And I could also go get a couple of goats from Nevin's farm that probably need a good home because they've been either neglected or abused. Mm-hmm. We've lost the ability to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm a taxpayer. It's my property. Not to mention, New Hampshire is a right to farm state.
It is a right to farm state. And this is, I'm glad that you brought that up, because this ordinance, while this is local control on this ordinance, I don't remember seeing anything about the right to farm RSAs mentioned inside this ordinance whenever it was when the petition warrant was passed.
If you go by what the UNH guidelines say, we still have 2 kids at home. We're a family of 4. We have the right to farm our property, and what that does with the acreage we have, we're entitled to have up to 2 cows a year if we wanted to. Goats, we could have up to 8 goats if we wanted to. The state of New Hampshire has adopted the UNH guidelines. There's already rules in place, and that's all we should be going by, because it's fair to the animals and it's fair to the property owners. Like right now, we have lost our right to farm, and it needs to be fixed.
Yep, we need to get that fixed. So we're working for the repeal.
Yep.
The group for Restore Pelham Property Rights is going to get together. There's going to be signs and things that are going to be put out. Yep. But we want to stay on top of this topic, as well as a few more topics that are going to be coming down the pipeline as well. We want to stay on top of this topic. What do we have coming up for the rest of the year with the Pelham GOP?
Ooh, lots of meetings. Obviously, we meet the first Monday of every month. When we start getting in, in this case, it's at the beginning of the month, so December will be okay. January will be iffy because it's going to be the beginning, so it'll be around New Year's. Sometimes we push it back a week. We always have candidates. The next speaker, I'm not going to say who that is at the moment. We might even take a break because it is December. I mean, maybe just do some organization stuff. But we will always have something going on and always be busy. There's still other candidates that are running that we can have come through. So we're gonna. It's the season.
And we're moving into election year.
Right.
And
Getting
that means
ready.
that both of you are going to be very, very busy again.
Yeah.
I mean, you thought you were busy this year. You're going to be really busy next year.
That's right. We're ready.
You're an area chair.
Correct.
for Hillsborough.
For the county, yeah.
For the county, and you're the chair here and the vice chair for the county.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I keep reminding those people because you guys do a lot of work. We will, again, be out there prepping up for our candidacies for the next year is election year for all of us, because we're every 2 years. We're a biennium. We're every 2 years. So I know that we'll be working very closely with you guys once again.
As always.
And we'll all
Definitely.
win. And we'll win.
That's right.
We'll win again.
Hashtag winning.
Any last thoughts?
I would like to say, if you are interested in meeting candidates, check out our Facebook page. We have great meetings. The candidates do great in that forum, and we always have good food. So please join us.
Awesome.
And one other thing, oops, sorry,
Yep.
on the restore thing, that it's the people that have taken over the restore thing and taken over in a good way have come in and take over,
They're leading the way.
leading the way.
Yeah.
They have
It's not
fantastic
any of
people.
us that are doing
Yeah,
it. It's
yeah.
them that are doing
Yep.
it. But I bring it up because it's a community thing, and this is a nonpartisan
Yes.
issue.
Right.
There are all sorts of folks that are involved with this because they see the need for this to be repealed.
And some of the stories and some of the people we've met out of this is amazing. We've met people that actually, when Article 3 passed, they actually gave their animals away. It was heartbreaking. And some of the people that if this doesn't get repealed, they're going to move. They're going to leave our town over this. But you got to meet some of these people. They're the most amazing people. Their pets are everything to them. And it's just been fantastic to see so many people get involved and just run with it. And it's been fantastic.
And I was out there, and now I have a handful of new friends that are very, very cool people. And I'm now talking with them all the time, So we're going to say good luck to restore Pelham property rights.
And expect an information meeting coming up for the public, too, so that we can all continue to be informed on this topic and just keep it in the forefront.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, Laura, thank you for being here.
Thank you,
John,
Marcia.
thank you again
Always.
for being here. Pelham GOP, best folks in the world right here. We want to thank you for tuning in to Granites Edge for this program. We learned a lot about our Representative Bob Greene and the committee that he serves on, Legislative Administration. John and Laura were here for a little bit more of an extended time this time with me, and we certainly appreciate you guys being here. Tune in with us next month. We're going to have a lot more information for you. We'll see you then.
We'd like to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to today's program. Each month, we'll bring you new information about legislation that's being proposed in our state capitol. If you'd like to find us or comment on our program, contact us on Facebook at Granites Edge. We also have a YouTube channel by the same name. Links that were mentioned in our program today will be listed there for your convenience. Tune in next time to Granites Edge.